And I go back a long, long way. He was a former county executive, as I was, and then he went on to Congress. In fact, he was the first Democratic freshman ever appointed to the House Select Committee on Intelligence. And today, he is the ranking member of that committee. So I want to, well, I'll tell you what it means. I want to alert all of you. And I'm not being partisan here, okay? This is a bipartisan, nonpartisan. But if the Democrats retake the House, Dutch will become chairman of that committee. I want to alert all of you out here who know him personally, okay? And now our guest speaker, Dutch Ruppersberger.
Thank you. Hello. Well, good morning or afternoon, whatever it is. I hate to inform you of this, but I'm going to do a PowerPoint. And when I do a PowerPoint, my staff makes me stay on script. But I do want to go off a little bit. We were talking about yeah, you know. We were talking about earthquake jokes. And Mr. Richardson, the head of economic development, made a comment, Congress, you better get it together. And I agree, by the way. The partisan politics over there drives moderates like me crazy. We really have to come together as a country. I thought we did this summer. Then last night we had another issue. It's just really, it's not what the people elected us to do. And I'm going to try to do whatever I can from an intelligence perspective. Now let me get into the earthquake. It was in August, I'm not sure of the date, and Mike Rogers, who's chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and I'm the ranking member. And we are very close, which is unusual now over in Washington. And Mike was a former FBI agent, and I was a former investigative prosecutor. And I always tease Mike and say, Mike, you know, good FBI agents always listen to their prosecutors, even though I'm in the minority now. So we do work together, and so we were in Washington, and we were working on our 2012 budget. And we've been working all summer, and you know, our budget in intelligence, we're not only dealing with cyber, we're dealing with space, we oversee CIA, NSA, FBI, all the terrorism issues, and there's just a lot going there. And I will say this, I can't give you the exact amount, but Mike and I together as a team working together, we were able to cut over $1 billion from our budget, and that's without affecting mission. And that's really important and what all the committees have to do. Well, about 20 minutes before the earthquake, Mike and I were down in a skiff. If you know what a skiff is, it's no windows, anything, and that's where our offices and our hearing rooms are. And Mike and I came to an agreement on our budget, and then the budget will have to go to the House floor. And by the way, we worked it well, and of all, we have 435 members, only 14 people didn't vote for our bill, which is almost a miracle. But what my point is about the earthquake is 20 minutes after we came to an agreement on the budget, the earthquake hit. And in Washington, everybody runs outside. I mean, thousands of workers there because we think it's an attack. And you know, the dome is probably the #1 target for Al-Qaeda in the United States, if they can get there. And my staff, my chief of staff here, Jen Briggs, is my deputy district director, and where's Jamie? Oh, there. Jamie Lennon, who used to be, I always tease her, she used to be a reporter for a newspaper in Baltimore, but I brought her from the dark side, and she's now our press person. Anyhow, getting back to the earthquake issue, we all ran outside, and Mike Rogers and I were probably the only two members in August who were on the Hill. So the media come up and said, well, what's going on, or how's things are happening? And we said, well, you know, when a Republican and a Democrat can come to an agreement in Washington, the earth is going to shake. And that's basically what happened. All right, well, as my notes say, good morning. Okay. I represent the 2nd Congressional District, and I'm proud of it. The district is a very unique district. and there's a lot going on in my district. I go from Fort Meade to Haverty Grace, and that includes Fort Meade, NSA, the Port of Baltimore, BWI Airport, Aberdeen, all those different issues. It's a very exciting area to represent. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, and Harford County. It's clearly the vital center of trade and commerce for the state and national economy, and includes what I just said, those different areas. My district is also the home to NSA, National Security Agency, at Fort Meade. And let me say this, I deal with a lot of serious issues, and we oversee a lot of issues. And I'm the first member of Congress who NSA can actually talk to, because I'm the first member of the Intelligence Committee to actually represent an NSA. And they're some of the finest, smartest people that you ever will see working for us to protect us. And clearly, we, as far as cyber is concerned, we have the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. Other than Mark Barnett, no. Mark. Mark and I grew up together, so I just wanted to let you know that. I went to West Point, he went to Maryland. He did. No, did I say West Point? Oh, that's terrible. No, you went to West Point, and I went to Maryland, and I majored in lacrosse. What did you major in at West Point? So, Mark, you shouldn't do that. I also serve as ranking member, as you've heard, I'm getting off my speech, which oversees all the collection. I talked about that. As ranking member, I'm also one of the Gang of Eight, and that's where I'm privy to really the country's most secret intelligence activities. I was one of the few that was working on the bin Laden raid when we brought him to justice. You know, that's the type of thing. And the reason for the Gang of Eight is the check. You're making me go off script again, but that clearly, we were considered to be, by other nations, not as good as we thought we were. And the team effort that came together, every focus of intelligence, including special operations, and when we came through, and you have to give President Obama credit, he made some hard decisions. Some people advised him not to do anything at all about that raid. And I think the message was sent to the world. You know, if you're going to attack and kill Americans, we're going to find you and we're going to bring you to justice. And that was the message that was sent out. And that's an important message, you know, in what we're doing, especially fighting the war on terrorism. All right, now, after hearing people, after being on the Gang of Eight and all the things that we know, we hear some of the issues from all over the world, cyber, Russia, China, all these things. People ask me, what keeps you up at night? And, you know, aside from maybe a spicy Mexican dinner followed by a couple of Grand Marniers, the two things that really keep me up at night are really weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. And it's going to be hard for a terrorist to do that, but you know, we always have to watch containers and bring in components of weapons of mass destruction. And the other issue is clearly cyber attacks. I mean, in my opinion, we are going to have a catastrophic attack, and we have to be ready for it. We know we're being attacked on a regular basis. We know NASDAQ has been attacked. We just saw what happened in Korea, North Korea attacking the banking system in South Korea. So today, we're here to talk about cybersecurity. And our focus is how to protect our homeland and also what this means for Maryland. We are and we will continue to be the cyber capital of not only the country but of the world. And now, you know, forget Silicon Valley. We will, in the next 10 years, be the Silicon Valley of the world, and we will probably have more technical jobs than Silicon Valley. Now, I'm reminded of a great story of a physicist who had won the Nobel Prize and was traveling all over the country giving the same speech over and over again, in a very complicated area of physics. He kept going around giving the same speech over and over again. Well, one day he was headed to Memphis on his tour, and his chauffeur said, "You know, Professor, I've heard that same speech so many times, I think I can give it myself from memory." And the professor said, "Well, look, chauffeur, they don't know me that well in Memphis. Why don't you get up and give the lecture, and I will take your uniform as a chauffeur, and I'll sit in the audience while you give the speech." And so they did. Well, they got to the lecture hall, and the chauffeur got up and gave the speech, speaking for an hour, word for word, getting a standing ovation. And the physicist who was sitting in the audience, he was just amazed. But then someone raised their hand and said, "Professor, that was an outstanding lecture on a very complex area of physics, but I have a few questions." He goes into a 3-paragraph question about various equations and formulas and theories. And the chauffeur thinks for a while, and then he says, looks at the man, and he said, "That's got to be the most stupidest question I've ever heard. And just to show you how dumb it is, I'm going to have my chauffeur answer." Now, I have to admit, I stole that little story from Secretary of Defense, former CIA Director Leon Panetta. He's a good friend of mine. And no, I didn't have the Chinese government hack him either, to get the information. But it serves the purpose of pointing out how many of you here today know a lot more about cyber security than I do. In fact, I'm so technical, I have to have staff use the clicker for this speech. You doing okay there? All right. Now, today, I'd like to give you a brief overview of our country's approach to cyber from a national perspective, and then talk about what this means for Maryland. The fact that you're here today means you think cybersecurity is clearly something we must address for safety and security in our nation. And believe me, you're right. In today's world, all you have to do is pick up the newspaper to see the cyber attacks pose a major threat on a personal level, and on a corporate level, and on a national security level. Early this week, Japan's biggest defense contractor, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Ltd., said hackers had gained access to its computers, with one newspaper saying its submarine, missile, and nuclear power plant factories had been the target. We're under attack too. The Department of Defense logged 260 million hacking attempts in 1 year alone. We've had critical defense files stolen in the past, including details about our U.S. fighter jets, missile systems, unmanned drones. It can go on and on. Now, I miss the good old days. Do you remember when the Prince of Nigeria emailed almost everyone in the country asking for $10,000 to start an urgent business venture? Anybody remember that? Well, I didn't, but no, those days are gone. Now we've got to worry about our nation states like North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, and Al-Qaeda cyber attacking us. Cyber crimes are also threatening our economic prosperity. They're costing business millions, if not billions. Each year, for example, in loss of productivity, revenues, proprietary interests, and that's not including bringing in a cyber expert to clean up the mess or the damages. I bet you can think of a better way to use money than paying someone to deal with the issue of cyber after you've been attacked. Now, the cyber threat will only get worse with the proliferation of computer-connected electronic devices and new technology like cloud computing. The question now is, what do we do about it? Now, I'm working on comprehensive legislation that will enable the government and private sector to work together towards our mutual goals. I think the business owners here today get it, but it's very hard to convince some businesses of the need for cyber because they can't see it. They don't understand it. Now, let's face it, 100% protection is unrealistic. Technology keeps evolving. We need businesses to determine what information has to be protected. They need to identify and classify different categories of information, and for example, financial or proprietary, and establish due care for each category. We must create a scale of protection and incentives for business that follows certain cybersecurity guidelines or a gold standard of protection. We need to craft federal data breach and privacy standards. Businesses simply can't comply with dozens of individual state standards. You need one standard. And by the way, not only in the United States, but we have to deal with the issue of global standards. We have to work to reduce costs to comply, such as tax credits for voluntary implementation of security tools and incentives for businesses to examine their supply chains and risk at points of purchases. We also have to establish a specific procedure for where businesses can go for help for their cleanup after they've been attacked. We have to establish a specific procedure for where businesses can go for cleanup. And we have to find ways to encourage the private sector to share problems with the government, and likewise. The government needs to do a better job in sharing information. Did you hear that, NSA? Okay. Department of Homeland Security recently started a pilot program for sharing classified data about cyber attacks involving about 20 volunteer companies. And already, this pilot program has stopped hundreds of attempted intrusions. Now, I'm working on legislation in the Intelligence Committee to expand on this concept because it's working. The idea is to share malware threats with businesses and internet service providers and say, hey, watch out for this. You're being attacked. Of course, there are many legal issues we still have to tackle, and the panel talked about that. In the coming months, we're going to try to sort it out. Some of our laws go back to 1947. And we also have to deal with the issue, the Attorney General mentioned that, and that's the issue of constitutional right, civil liberties. But what we need to do is that people have to understand we don't own the internet, but we have to balance that out. We live in America, and that's important to us. Now, for example, how do we build a model that lets businesses voluntarily share information with the government while protecting them from liability, privacy, FOIA, and antitrust violations? These are all areas that we have to work through and have litigation or policy set. How do we get information to companies that don't have cleared staff? That's another major issue. We need to create new levels of security clearance. Security clearances, we clearly have way too many people who are classified. But when you have, the reason you have clearances and there are certain things that we cannot share with anybody because it affects our national security. But in the old days, which before 9/11, we had too much stovepipe. And it's not need to know anymore. It's really the ability to share. And we have a responsibility to make sure that all of our agencies share and the teamwork approach. That's how we got bin Laden, and that's how we have to work with this. Now, these are the things that I will be exploring for my legislation. For those of you here today who are already involved in the cyber industry, your input will be critical. We're going to be looking to the shareholders and stakeholders to weigh in as much as possible, and I mean that we need to understand your point of view. Remember, we have .mil, and NSA and Cyber Command basically are in charge of .mil, and they're doing a great job in protecting that. Then we have .gov, and then we have the private sector. 80% of all that we have to work with and deal is going to be in the private sector. Now, a major component of the cyber dialogue will be education and training. I'm concerned that the U.S. is in a dangerous position compared to other countries in this regard. In many technical fields, more than half the degrees are awarded to students who are in the United States on a temporary visa, according to the National Science Foundation. And what I mean by that, and I've been working with different people, including Bill Gates, about our immigration laws. It's become a political issue, but here's what has happened. We had the smartest people in the world for many years coming to the United States to be educated and to do their research and development, whatever they wanted, the Yales, the MITs, the University of Baltimore Law School at night. I mean, all, that's right. That's Harvard of the South. But we do, these people would come to the United States. We don't have exclusivity. We have a lot of brilliant people on brilliance, where we need other people throughout the world, wherever they come. And once these scientists come here and are educated here, they want to stay here. They want to continue their research and development, and now they have to leave. And it's really affecting us. And it's something that we have to turn around, because a lot of scientists, some of the smartest in the world that could help us in cyber, help us in space, help us in these areas, they're not coming to our universities anymore, and we have to turn that around. In many technical fields, more than half the degrees, I said, were awarded to students who just came here on a temporary visa. Now, China, and this is an alarming issue that we have to deal with in education. China produces nearly 7 times as many engineers as we do. According to the most recent data, China in 2009 awarded more than 440,000 degrees in engineering, math, and probably rocket science, compared to our 65,000 in the U.S., and half of those were not Americans. The only good news, but it's getting very close, is that our curriculum is still considered to be superior, but they're getting close, and so is Russia. So that's a major issue we have to deal with. So we have to focus our efforts on STEM education, and China starts in elementary school. We need to find ways to encourage high school students to stay in Maryland for college. Now I'm getting parochial about talking about Maryland. Then when they graduate, we need incentives for them to stay and work here in Maryland. We need to reach out and find individuals, wherever they live, and find these individuals and test these individuals that have the aptitude for science and engineering. That's extremely important for the future of our country and for the security of our country. Now, the good news is that under the leadership of Governor Martin O'Malley, represented here today by Christian Johansson, who is Secretary of the Department of Business and Economic Development, we in Maryland are leading the nation in developing STEM education in school curriculums at all levels. High schools in both Anne Arundel and Harford counties have launched Homeland Security programs that are national models. We also have several of the nation's top research universities, including UMBC. And by the way, Freeman made me say this, but I'm proud of him. Where UMBC, under his Freeman Hrabowski, President Hrabowski's leadership, was just named the top up-and-comer by U.S. News and World Report. And that's significant. That's all over the country. As well as we have a Johns Hopkins University, Maryland, College Park, Towson University, Morgan State, Anne Arundel County Community College. Give you a shout out there, Marty. Morgan and University of Maryland University College, which is a tremendous college in and of itself. In all, more than 20 colleges and universities in Maryland currently offer degrees in computer science. Now, 13 colleges and universities are designated also by NSA as national centers for academic excellence research, and that leads to increased opportunities for grants and contracts with federal agencies. My point is that in this corridor, the 95 corridor, we are positioned to have a great opportunity to grow, create new jobs, and we are, and we will continue to be, I've said it before, the cyber capital of the world. I don't know if we want to call it a cyber valley. We might want to take away the valley completely once we knock Silicon off their berth, but we'll see. My hope is, though, that graduates of programs like this fill the tens of thousands of jobs coming to Maryland, especially along the I-95 corridor. There are 50 federal agencies and research facilities in Maryland, plus 3 international airports in the Maryland, Washington, and Virginia region. So we are home base for our national defense technology, as well as a perfect location for defense contractors, IT companies, and researchers. And let me say this something about contractors. Contractors, like politicians and other people, have been under attack on a regular basis, and how almost some people think contractors are bad. And that's not the situation at all, especially in our field. If we manage contractors correctly, and we make sure that we hold them to their performance and their time and whatever else, that's one of the reasons we are the most powerful country in the world. Because what the contractors do is that they do the research and development that sometimes we, in the government, we might have the expertise, but we don't have the money and the resources to do it. And if we work it together, the contractors together with government, especially in the field we're talking about here today, it's a win-win for all of us, as long as we hold the contractors accountable for performance and to make sure we pay them what they're worth. Now, I'll say it again, Maryland will be, and I like to reinforce this, you have to market your state, Maryland will be the cyber capital of the world, and we have, again, more technical jobs coming here probably than Silicon Valley. And that's real important, and we're going to keep marking that. Anybody here in economic development? A couple of you? That's a real tool. Now, just to name a few of what we have, I want to repeat it again. Of course, you know NSA. And by the way, General Alexander, I think, is one of the top professionals in the country, if not the world, and especially in the area of cyber. He's not only the Director of National Security of NSA, but also he's head of Cyber Command. Cyber Command is really the military side to protect the .mil. We have IARPA, Intelligence Advanced Research Projects, in College Park. You've heard of DARPA. IARPA is the DARPA of the intelligence community. Research, development, thinking way ahead. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and Defense Information System, DISA, and it goes on, some of the key federal agencies that are now coming into our area. And let's not forget Fort Meade, New Home, I referred to it before, of the U.S. Cyber Command, and again, all the research and technology and development going on in Aberdeen. Now, all these agencies have seen major growth in recent years and will continue to see it. By 2014, the government will be spending nearly $12 billion on information security projects, services, and largely at the agencies in Maryland, according to the Office of Management and Budget. And the technology produced within the federal government will eventually move to the marketplace, both large and small. Tremendous opportunities, not with government, but the marketplace also. Now, here's an example, a local example. The federal government had a need to protect the last 2 feet of cybersecurity, which is literally the distance between computer screen and the user. Now, a company called Oculus, O-C-U-L-I-S, based in Hunt Valley, designed unique camera-based software that prevents anyone but the authorized user to see what's on his or her computer screen. They got a contract with the federal government, and as a result of that, They developed a retail version that's for sale on their website. And again, this is an example of what we can do in this field and the growth that we can have in the state of Maryland, all tie into the cyber issue. Now, we'll see demand for cyber goods and services go up across all sectors as our partners in the private sector answer the country's call to action as well. In fact, the commercial market for cybersecurity is estimated to surpass the government as more entities such as universities, banks, financial service companies, and online retailers address the need for information security. Overwhelmingly, we're hearing that the most immediate and significant challenge is finding qualified workers, particularly those able to obtain security clearances to meet future needs. Now, we have to build an army of cyber warriors. Do we have any cyber warriors in this room? Oh. Now, I'm not sure. Remember, I went to Maryland now. Who wouldn't be intimidated by that on the football field? But we got to intimidate the rest of the world not to cyber attack us. So, anyhow. Okay. But we do have to address the issue of training needs and retain workers and also retrain workers. That's so important because, as we know, we keep evolving in technology. Now, my office recently hosted a job fair in partnership with Mantech. You have George Peterson, who's a great American story. He's the founder of Mantech, where they have 10,000 people, and just like a lot of the other companies here, they keep growing. And anyhow, we had a job fair with them. So and they also recently we had a ribbon cutting at their building in Aberdeen. They brought, I think, over 300 jobs and growing there, as a lot of other companies are in this room too. Now, the line of potential applicants that we had for the job fair was so long. You know, went down the hall, out the door. I mean, people were waiting for a long time. And these people were coming from all over the country for this job fair. But what we found, not many people possess the requisite certification, clearance, or sometimes expertise. And we need to look at ways to retrain people and help them get clearance out. Was it said on the panel that in the next 5 years, we're going to have a tremendous amount of people retiring from NSA? Is that? I mean, this is an example. This is serious. The education and training is one of the most important things we can deal with, or we're going to step back from China, Russia. Remember, in those communist countries, they can order their 4.0 students to go into space, to go into cyber. You know, we have to incentivize them, and we have to create more cyber warriors. I kind of like the name, and if we recruit them, maybe we can get University of Maryland to donate one of those uniforms. I don't know. It's all about Under Armour, you know. They. You know, the side story, I'm getting off script. That's another great success story. Kevin Plank played football at University of Maryland. He was on special teams. And he ended up starting Under Armour. And they're a real threat right now to a lot of the manufacturers, including Nike. And he wanted to, I'm sure he donates a lot of money to University of Maryland. I'm not sure of that, but I assume. But you know, he was their first client, and Kevin Plank now has, I assume, worked with the athletic director and the coach to have these new uniforms. And what we found out, not only do the students like it, and the players like it, it's the talk of the nation. And they also use those uniforms. They had all the basketball recruits at the football game, and they loved it too. So it all comes together. But it's Go Maryland. We're going to keep working through and helping the state. All right, I'm back on script. All right. Okay. Now, Kirkland Murray. I see Kirkland. Where's Kirkland Murray? From Anne Arundel County. He's executive director of Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Corporation. They've launched a program to get unemployed and underemployed Marylanders into the cyber industry. So far, the program called Pathways to Cyber Security Careers has been very successful. Anne Arundel County has led the region and trained individuals through the program, but they also have trained displaced and underemployed workers through Anne Arundel County, Howard, Carroll counties, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, in the entire Baltimore region. Now, this means we have hundreds of people in our region who now have cybersecurity certifications from entry level to the highest levels and are ready to work. So, Kirkland, we thank you for that. But Kirkland did say to us that for all their efforts, he's still seeing more major barriers such as inexperience and security clearances. Again, security clearances, we have to deal with the issue. Security clearances are something that a lot of us have been working on for a long period of time in Congress, but you know, right now the process really takes too long, especially in this field of cybersecurity. I'm going to go off again about clearances. Now, don't take this the wrong way. NSA has said some nice things about you today. You know, you have somebody who's not in a classified area who works at NSA. Now, you have to have some clearance, or they check your background. And then that person, say, lives in your community, and the neighbor will say, well, where do you work? Well, I can't tell you. Well, you know, that's not, we don't need that. And if anything, and this is why I really appreciate first working with General Hayden and General Alexander, we should be proud of NSA. It's part of Maryland. We have a tremendous amount of employees there. And we need to let people know. There were some bad articles, and they weren't correct factually. But there were some bad articles. You know how the media is. Like you used to be Jamie, but now you came to my side. And I always tease her about that. So anyhow, we need to let people know what NSA does. We have to be more open. And in the classified area, that's where we are. We don't tell anybody anything, and that's why we have it. So this clearance thing will be dealt with, and it has to, because it's hurting us as a country. We also have to educate young people about what the impact of their actions are now. I know we all used to do things when we were young, and, but you know, the implications somehow can stay with you. If you know, when you're evaluating somebody for a clearance, you're looking at the whole record. And what we have to be concerned and let younger generation know that we're going to look at what's on Facebook, Twitter, and decisions that the younger generations make in their social lives go in their permanent record, and that can be used against them, especially trying to get a clearance. So and remember this, digital dust lasts forever, and that's important. Now, businesses can also take an active part in the building of cyber pipeline by hiring people like participants in the Anne Arundel County Pathways Program or recent college graduates. This is something that I encourage everybody here today to evaluate, find the right person, and hopefully we'll have the system to do that. There's some of these major companies I know right now are working in this regard to try to find the cyber warriors. The one area that we have issues in this country about unemployment, one of the highest priorities is us to create jobs now. And yet in this corridor, we need jobs. And it's important that we continue to find the new cyber warriors of tomorrow. Now, today I've talked about what I'm doing in Congress to address cybersecurity as a national security issue. I've talked about Maryland's position as a new cyber frontier and what this means for us in terms of jobs. I've also discussed what we need to do to fill that pipeline with qualified workers. Now, you're going to think this is different, but I want to conclude by talking about my mom, Peggy. She's 89 years old, still drives a car, very active, independent. She defines herself by her experience, I think, during World War II, called the Greatest Generation, and the sacrifices that were expected of civilians for the good of their country and their community. My father went off to war, and my mother entered the workforce at Domino's Sugar. She was in management. The only reason she went there because she graduated from college, and they needed the women who stayed home to take over the companies because there weren't any men. Now, along with other Americans, she made sacrifices like not eating butter, pulling down shades at night, volunteering, buying war bonds. You know, it was all about the war effort, patriotism, and coming together as a country. It's a shame we don't have that attitude right now. In the 1950s, it was to protect the homeland from communism and nuclear war. Adults today who were in elementary school, who were elementary school students, how many? Anybody? Admit it? I do. At the time, still remember duck and cover, going underneath your desk. All right, in the 1970s, there was a public education to teach people not to litter. People wouldn't dare throw their trash outside the window now after this public education. The image of the Native American standing by the side of the road with a tear running down his face was a very powerful visual that a lot of people still remember. That image really taught people to take care of our environment and our country. I think we need another public campaign like this to teach Americans that homeland security begins with them. My mother's world has changed, as all of ours have, as we live in a new age of technology, and we have to adapt to the challenges that this brings. Cybersecurity is not some abstract policy Washington is trying to impose on people. It's real, and it's going to take everyone working together. Every computer user has a role in the security of our nation. Homeland security, national security, starts with every computer user. Now, I want to thank you for having this event here today, Ted, and pulling all these great people together. We have a tremendous opportunity in this corridor, and and the more that we can come together, we can network, we can develop relationships, we can work the partnerships between the private sector and also government, and don't forget academia. And I think it's extremely important that we stay together as a country and as a team. So thank you. Now I'll open up to any questions if you want, and then I'm going to go back to Washington. Anybody, any questions?
First, let's give Dutch a big round of applause. I've got the mic, Dutch, so if they have questions, I know your time is limited, but let's try to get a couple for you. Anybody have any questions for Dutch? Our panel can begin to assemble up there, by the way, because after Dutch, we'll come to our panel with one other speaker. Any questions for Dutch? Come on up.
I was going to get it started by saying, what happened to the Ravens last week? But, you know.
Don't talk about that, Dutch. You were doing real good.
Yes, sir. Can you share any insights on this super committee and what you may see coming out of these things in negotiations in Congress?
This is what we have, I think. I don't have an issue with what and because people were elected pursuant to our system of government, on the fact that the Tea Party made the issue of spending, and they put it out there, and they should have, because our deficit clearly is hurting us throughout the world and as a country. However, once you put an issue on the table, you have to deal with it the appropriate way. And I think what's happening now, our number one issue is creating jobs. We're never going to come out of this recession and where we are now if we don't move forward with jobs. You need a job to deal with your family, your country, and your community. And what the concern is now is that this new group who is there now, which again, I'm glad they put the issue of spending on the table, is that they don't have the experience to know what to cut and what not to cut. You know, Ted will tell you, or anybody who's been in management, I think Baltimore County had 22,000 employees basically, including teachers. And you do, at least what I did as county executive, is called program review. There's some programs that could be great, but you can't afford them. But the programs that you do have, and especially in the field that I'm in, and I'm happy to say that Chairman Rogers and I were able to cut $1 billion from our budget, and it's not going to affect what we're doing here today. So then we have a situation where they weren't listening, the group, to their leadership, and they're in the majority in the House. And right now, that's caused a lot of back and forth. You know, the days of I believe politics in life should be about relationships and trust. Well, it just isn't happening anymore. And there are 435 people, and there are a lot of agendas. And by the way, the left, no, I'm sorry if you're left, the left, in my opinion, are just as bad as the right. They put issues on the table, but then you have to manage. Somebody has to manage. So now we got to the point where we almost went into a default situation, which would have been disastrous to our country. And then they finally came to an agreement, as Americans usually do, and came to an agreement with the super committee. Now, what I think is going to help the super committee, because I don't know how the group there can come together if they haven't come together before. But if we don't come together, the ramifications of that are really could be catastrophic. It's a 50% cut across the board everywhere, just in the area of defense, intelligence, the things that I work with every day. Could be catastrophic. Layoffs, NSA, CIA. I mean, it could really be serious. And you know, if you look at world history, you have to be strong in order to be safe and to have the democracy that we do. Countries are always trying to take over weaker countries. Look at Africa and some of the countries there right now. And if we have a 50% cut in defense and intelligence, it could really hurt us with China and Russia. China's got tons of money, and they're going to the moon. I mean, they're attacking us as we speak, and they're doing everything they can to be stronger, and Russia's right there. They just don't have the money. So it's extremely, so I think this leverage, that if this committee doesn't come to an agreement, what's out there would be even worse. Now, last night, we had a vote. It was a hard vote for me, but we're just trying to increase the government for a couple more months, called a continuing resolution. And we thought there was an agreement this summer, we'll just get it passed. In the last minute, the other side, and I don't want to be partisan here, put in a bill to take money away from, I think it was a fund of about $80 million, research and development, which created about 39,000 jobs, trying to get the car industry to be more efficient as far as fuel is concerned. And the agreement that we finally passed to do the super committee, this would be a straight CR. All of a sudden, here we go again. Now, I have a lot of government employees in my district. I felt like, hadn't we learned the lesson why people don't like Congress? It's this back and forth, philosophical issues all the time. But as it turned out, it didn't pass, and that was a real embarrassment to John Boehner, who wants to do the right thing, by the way. I know John Boehner, and he wants to do the right thing. And, but yet he could not get his votes. And it was a real embarrassment when you're the speaker to lose something on the floor. Now, hopefully, it'll be a message to the 50 Tea Party people that we can't go back to where we were this summer. And if not, John Boehner is going to have to come over to more moderate Democrats like me, and there are not many of us left there anymore, that will get enough votes to pass this CR. And again, the CR is just keeps the government moving for the next 3 months. The big issue is when the super committee comes together and makes recommendations. So I can't tell you right now where it's going to go.
Any other questions for Dutch before he has to take off?
Yeah.
Coming over. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Greg Hofstrand, Sotero Defense. Clearance process.
Wait, I didn't hear it.
Sotero Defense.
Okay.
Clearance process. You were talking about that?
The what process?
Clearance.
Clearance, yeah.
Clearances. We in this industry, the defense industry, has got a real problem with the young kids coming out of college, fully cyber intelligent, but we can't get them on the contracts because they don't have a clearance.
Right.
It's a real catch-22. So you had brought up the security clearance thing. I thought if you could talk about that a little bit, please.
Why don't they have a clearance? Do you know?
They don't have a clearance because it's a catch-22. You must be on a contract to get a job and have a clearance, but you can't get a clearance until you get a job.
It's one of the most serious issues, but let me tell you, as we speak right now, there's certain people that I'm working with, I can't get it out there yet because you have to worry about contracts and who's going to do what, but hopefully we'll be working with our colleges and institutions, not only in Maryland, but throughout the country, to deal with that issue of clearance, especially in cyber. We need cyber warriors, and we need those individuals, and if they can't get the clearance, what are we going to do? So hopefully we'll address it. I'm making that a priority. Chairman Rogers is. In our intelligence committee that we only have certain jurisdiction. Now, I'm also on Armed Services Committee, too, and I was on Appropriations, so we all work kind of that together. But I agree, it is one of the major issues that we'd have to deal with. Yeah.
You want to repeat that, Dutch? Oh.
For those of you, again, and I assume you're a small business.
Two athletes up there.
Okay, small business. We do have a program at NSA called the PISA program that is designed to just address that issue. Can't get a clearance without a contract. You can't get a contract without a clearance. So this program was put into effect about 5 years ago. We've had over 1,100 companies go through the program where we will clear you and clear some of your people. We'll clear the executives, the key management people, and we'll clear some worker people so that when you get a contract, they can go ahead and migrate over. You can backfill their slots in that program, clear a couple more people, and it's a way for you to build bench strength. So one of the things is if you have a product or a service that may be of interest to us, look into our PISA program and we'll try to get you positioned. The big hurdle for those familiar with that is the technical recommendation. You have to have something we want or something we need. But we do have a program, and in general, DOD and NSA, this whole issue of clearances has actually gotten better. DOD had a regulation go into effect about 1.5 years ago that, especially for people new to the community, that clearance process from start to finish, meaning going through your background investigations, and in our case, polygraphs, and adjudication, has to be completed within 60 days. And right now, NSA, the last number I heard for us, and I can't speak for the other agencies, we were at about 66 days. So it is getting better. It's recognized as an issue. Believe me, we want as many. We understand the issue. And for us in the community, the absence of having enough cleared people creates for you contractors a bidding war to keep good cleared talent and drives our rates up. So we're very attuned to this. So I can tell you we're working on it. And again, if you have some questions about the PISA program, please come see us. Thanks. Sorry.
Good, Mark. I want to tell you a little story. I'm not going off script again. Mark and I tease each other a lot. I've known Mark since elementary school. I was captain of the safety patrol. He was a lieutenant, so he was served under me. That was my first experience in leadership, by the way. But here's an example Mark is an example from you all that are out there. Mark went to West Point. He got his master's in engineering, his MBA, and he went out to the private sector, and he was involved in international business and did very well. Well, when I first came to the Intelligence Committee, and I knew that NSA had some issues, and General Hayden was there, and I said, I've checked with the private sector. I'm here to help you, but I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong. Let's work together to make you stronger. And one of the things that I saw at NSA, that they didn't have enough people with business experience. Individuals, it's a different philosophy, not just all military, yes sir, no excuses sir, that type of thing, but you needed a different type of group of expertise. And Mark was very patriotic, and he wanted, I talked to General Hayden, and Mark decided to apply. Well, when he went through the process, I think the first polygraph turned him down because he had relations with terrorists or something. It was crazy. And then he said, well, come back 6 months. Well, I said, well, wait a minute. Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And Mark came back, took the polygraph, and passed it. But, he would have been rejected. And this goes on. Why I'm telling you this story, though, there are a lot of you that are out there that have been in business, you have expertise in this field. You might want to come back if you have it to work for the government and to help us as a country. Now, I'm not telling you to do it, but it's something that if you all out there would consider it if you have a certain expertise. All right, any other questions out there, Ted?
Dutch, thank you very much.
I want to say one thing.
Go.
I see that Paul Wiedefeld's here from the airport.
Yes,
He's doing a great job. Thank you for all that you do. And an individual I have a tremendous amount of respect for. He was a business person. He was in economic development. I worked a lot with him. There were about 5 or 6 of us who worked to bring BRAC.